Welcome back to the Proof of Vision podcast with Elia Research. Today I had on Shiv, the CEO over at Boundless. Boundless is the ZK smart contract and settlement layer that allows developers and teams across all the chains to scale up their ZK powered verifiable compute. So Boundless is built out by the Risc ZERO team, right? So Risc ZERO actually played an important role in the ZK space, pioneering the first zkVM. And then Boundless was basically created to really kind of speed up that adoption of this technology, right? So it allows developers to plug into this technology across any chain. It's not an L1, it's not an L2, right? Like we've seen over the years, ZK Sync, all these chains. Boundless meets the teams where they are and is plug and play across OP stack and across other chains as well. So in this discussion, we get to break down the history behind Risc ZERO, and then also Boundless. And then we also talked about the kind of mentality that the team has when it comes to decision making and shipping with the goal of adoption and their approach to onboarding like applications with real users and revenues. And then we also talked about more general concepts as well around the necessity of compute and verifiable compute in crypto specifically, and how this is actually growing today. And then what kinds of considerations that protocol and application teams should and maybe shouldn't be making to optimize for user and revenue growth. Welcome back to another episode of Proof of Vision. Guys, with Elia Research, today I have on the CEO from Boundless and by extension, Risc ZERO, Shiv. Do you maybe want to give a quick background, more personal background on yourself first for our viewers?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Daniel. Super excited to be here. From my personal intro, I'll start with where I live. I live in Seattle, home of all your favorite cloud operations. And this is also where Risc ZERO and eventually Boundless was founded as well. Most of the original founding team is based here. I've been in Seattle for like 15 years. I started my career here as a database engineer at Microsoft, working on SQL Server, and eventually moved around a little bit, but cut my teeth in cybersecurity as well as rideshare. I worked at both Lyft and Grab. Grab is a rideshare company in Southeast Asia. I was one of the first EMs there, and Amazon as well. So I have pretty long history in Web 2. And then when I was working at Lyft, my then manager moved on to become the head of engineering at Coinbase. And he told me about a few challenges that they had and a few successes that I had at Lyft and how that maybe like makes it an interesting first step for me to get into crypto. So Coinbase was my first sort of entry into crypto. But folks who use Coinbase and have worked at Coinbase also realize it's a part Web 2, part Web 3 company. It isn't like fully crypto native. And as I started, building out more things at Coinbase, where famously I also worked on the QR code ad that everyone remembers, as well as launching different countries, helped launch in Japan, India, and a bunch of other things as well. As I was going through that, I realized like, okay, so I'm actually really passionate about blockchain. Like it's working at Coinbase was the first time I realized like, oh, here's like this new thing that aligns philosophically with how I think about the world and what kind of impact I want to have on the world. I need to go deeper. Interestingly, some of my former direct reports at Lyft had moved to Ava Labs, the company behind the Avalanche L1. And they sent me a message saying like, yo, dude, I think they're hiring like a director or VP. Come manage us again, which is of course like an extremely flattering thing to hear that someone says, come manage me again. So I reached out and then we had like fantastic conversation and Patrick and I really clicked and I moved to Ava Labs, which is again fantastic working with Goon and Patrick and Steven and the whole like dev team there at Ava Labs, which is top notch. I started getting much deeper into here's the promise of the technology and then I started figuring out what's lacking. Why isn't this taking off? To me, like one of the key things is scaling. And this idea of how you actually build applications and then businesses on top of those applications, which is my background in particular. I realized there's like a huge gap here. And at the same time, Risc ZERO happened. They had just put out, a lot of information around the the zkEVM that they'd built, and how they are making it cheaper and faster and more accessible to devs to write zk programs. And I started reading up, and I fell in love. And thankfully, they were also looking for someone. And then everything just clicked. It was the company's kind of down the road for me, and culturally we aligned quite a lot as well. And since then, been working at Risc ZERO. I manage all of product and engineering, and as we start moving towards the next step of our journey, which is Boundless, which is bringing zk to every chain, to every dev, to every use case, and really democratizing access to zk. That's really my passion as well. So even though I'm not a co-founder of Risc ZERO, the company recognized my talents are well suited to help grow this new venture. So that's why I'm leading it. That's why I'm the CEO of Boundless. Anything else in particular about my personal life, I'm happy to talk about it as well.
I think that was a great start to things. Yeah, so definitely have like a pretty esteemed background across applications. Like everyone's used, or probably on our pod, many of our American users will be familiar with Coinbase. Yeah, Uber, Lyft. Obviously, I live in Southeast Asia. I'm very familiar with Grab. Yeah, that's great. So let's move on to. I guess we can actually start like with Risc ZERO. I guess yeah, we can start there. Like, can you maybe break down for the people who aren't familiar? Yeah, kind of like Risc ZERO's role. It's sort of pioneering like the zkVM, and then from there we can move on to Boundless and yeah, how things kind of evolved.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very, very interesting story, and I think it's worth knowing as well. Like one of the things are that like verifiable computation and zk has actually existed as a field of study for like a few decades, 30 years at least, of the in universities and so on. It's part of information security research. Verifiable computation, or zk, has this unique property whereby you can prove computation without actually revealing any details about what you computed and anything else, which has a extraordinary fit for like extreme finance and military research and security and so on. But one of the other properties that zk has is this property of succinctness. And what that actually means is like it doesn't matter how much you compute, the proof is pretty much small, and in the case of snarks, fixed size, which is a very, very unique property. So let's say, Daniel, you decide to take like one of the largest known prime numbers and prove that it's a prime. Obviously, you computed quite a lot, but the proof size is going to be tiny. It's going to be the same as me proving 4 by 2 is 2, and the proof size is the same. And that is a fantastic property that allows for scale on blockchain. And everyone started recognizing that once blockchains becoming more preeminent and people had more R&D budgets. Polygon famously like spent hundreds of millions of dollars like acquiring every zk researcher they could find to build out one circuit. Now that's actually important to remember. Even back then, the way to actually implement zk, one thing is this theoretical property of zk. How do you actually implement it was to write a circuit. That is the domain of mathematicians, and not necessarily your run-of-the-mill devs. CS grads from even Stanford, Harvard, whatever, are not going to be able to write these circuits in production quality at the very least. It is one step beyond what they generally do, and it's very domain specific. Jeremy, who's one of the co-founders of the company and the principal researcher, is a self-taught mathematician. He never really went to college. He taught himself enough mathematics to actually advance the field, a la Ramanujan and all the other legendary mathematicians. And he wanted his friends to try out zk. That's literally his motivation. It's like, oh, I read the paper. This is fantastic. This is going to be the big shiz. Hey, Frank. Hey, Brian. Like, I want you guys to get excited about this. And obviously, both Brian and Frank are fantastic devs. They were also like not like mathematicians or that caliber. They were like, yeah, we're not really interested in writing circuits. So Jeremy sits back and like does what he does best, which is how do I get my friends to write zk? How can I use my background in hardware and compilers and AI, in quantum computing? How do I actually bring forth all my expertise to like help my friends write zk programs? Hence was formed the zkVM idea. He was like, should I just build a computer that does this? Should I just build a virtual machine that can take the program as an input in a high-level programming language? That's when Risc ZERO started. He used his background in open standards, things like Risc 5 and his compiler background to actually make sure Risc Zero is built to open standards and the zkVM component, and it had a huge splash. On day one, people immediately realized the power of this abstraction and what it could do for the industry. Everyone's eyeballs were riveted. Now, one key thing is like when you create such a huge abstraction, people usually want to look at what the trade-off is. Is the trade-off performance? Because that would be like a major concern. ZK is notoriously or was notoriously slow. Does this make it even slower? One of the more interesting things about what we did with the zkVM is what I like to call platformization. Most standard and highly used software stacks, your databases or something else, or operating systems, networks, they basically platformize themselves such that people can actually work on multiple layers simultaneously to fine-tune different things. The zkVM was built that way. And what that actually allowed us to do over a very short period of time is to start outpacing handwritten circuits, because we were doing optimizations at the mathematics layer, the proof systems, software, GPU, and hardware. All of it was being optimized at the same time. So over a period of 1-2 years, we've actually seen like 100x, if not like more. I actually think there's some number there which says 280x. I haven't verified it, but like it's that order of magnitude of change in terms of performance, which makes it now a foregone conclusion that if you want to use ZK in Web3, at least Web2 soon, but Web3 for sure, you want to use a zkVM. You want to write your programs in Rust so you can test them. Anybody can write them. You can maintain them, submit them to GitHub, easier to audit, and reuse high quality code that has been written, audited, and hopefully by the end of the year formally verified for everybody to sort of build and also like start managing money and resources. So that's the story of the zkVM. Now, the interesting thing is like that's just a piece of software, right? So we have the computer, as it were. Now, the next stage is how do you actually bring it to everybody on chain? We actually went through a whole product market fit exercise of figuring out how do people actually want to use the zkVM. Do we just give them the software and they run it in their own data centers? The answer is like an immediate no. We built a SaaS service for them and said like, hey, if I give you RESTful APIs, is that what you want to use? People said, that's fun. It's a very good playground for us to test out capabilities, but we can't use it in production. We got high quality feedback from teams like Eigenlayer and a bunch of other teams as well who said like, no, we need decentralized. We can't take dependencies on things that are centralized. We can't take dependencies on things that have properties that reduce our security posture. So it needs to be as decentralized as us, if not more. That's when we went about designing Boundless. Just a quick fun story about that as well is that we considered 3 different designs for Boundless. We called it Project Trident, where we actually chased building an L1 and L2, or taking this sort of smart contract approach, which allows us to be chain agnostic. And we finally landed on that. Now we are pretty much on the cusp of announcing our mainnet beta, bringing multiple proofs, multiple customers online, and really charting our path towards mainnet.
Alchemix Finance empowers you to spend and save at the same time with a self-repaying, interest-free, non-liquidatable loan. Deposit your assets and access your future yield today. Available on Mainnet, Arbitrum, and Optimism. Head to alchemix.fi to get started.
Yeah, I think that was a very great, pretty expansive overview, of both Risc Zero and kind of like the general zkVM space, and then also how Boundless aims to kind of like help applications tap into that. So I guess we can kind of break down like the need for something like a Boundless. So I know the concept of, in a more like general sense today, like you have compute and or maybe in like the headlines and stuff, everyone's saying like, okay, compute's going to get like commoditized or whatever, but it's still very scarce. And then in blockchains, it's even more scarce, right? So can you kind of maybe walk me through the idea behind like making compute more abundant on chain, like why this is important, and how you guys are kind of going about doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the mental model that I want your listeners to actually take away is when you think about Ethereum and they talk about the world computer, a lot of people think about like this like supercomputer sitting somewhere, but what it actually is a Raspberry Pi. It's an extremely secure Raspberry Pi. So if you add more nodes to Ethereum, like lots of validators come online, maybe you 10x the number of validators, the computational power of Ethereum doesn't change. And that's kind of annoying. It becomes way more secure. It becomes way more censorship resistant, probably becomes more decentralized as well, but the computational power doesn't increase. So you can only do as much as it allows right now. And basically, you have thousands of applications vying with each other for block space, for this limited amount of like compute per block that is available to everybody. And the way they've scaled this is through L2s and lots of other like interesting strategies. But ultimately, you are now vying for like this very, very limited space. How does that actually impact the end user, right? So if all the developers start with this point of view that like, oh, there's only so much compute, I need to make my logic as small and as efficient as possible before even considering what the user wants, you end up with applications that don't really appeal to anybody. A proxy for features is computation. Like basically when you click a button, a bunch of stuff happens. All of it is just compute. We've gotten used to, at least in the Web 2 world, of unlimited compute. AWS, Azure, GCP, data centers all over the world. Like you're basically used to like, oh, just put a credit card in, it'll just scale elastically to infinity, and we can just build whatever we want. Compute is cheap, it's abundant. So you just focus on users and the user experience. But if compute is not cheap, it's very limited, you start focusing on what is basically possible and just stick to that. Which is why there is this whole narrative of like, oh, like this is all that we can build on blockchain, or there's no killer application. Mostly because there are so many severe limitations on what you can build. A lot of it comes down to compute. What zk actually promises is elastic, unending compute. One of the interesting things about Boundless is that if we have a lot more provers bringing a lot more machines, our ability to take on more computation increases. So we scale similarly to AWS, which is fantastic news for everybody. If you are building an application and you want to add more features, Boundless allows you to do that. You can move your mindset away from, oh, what do I do with this limited computation available to me, towards like, okay, what is possible? What all can I do with unlimited computation? That change in mindset for a developer, for a product manager, for a business executive will show itself in rich applications, in rich UI, in a rich set of features that promise the exact same guarantees that we have on Ethereum and Solana and all the other chains right now, which is amazing news. It's the last missing piece in building great killer applications using the open stack. So that's the promise of zk, and that's really what Boundless is focused on delivering.
Yeah, I think it was good at the end there to highlight like the kind of necessity. Maybe it goes over people's head a little bit, but you have like, I think a good example is kind of like you have the pump fund ICO coming up, right? So I think like apps are shifting a little bit in crypto towards like, okay, like a small amount of users, but they have like a lot of money per user. Towards like pump fund. I think like on the Trump's inauguration, it was like 400K people onboarded, right? Some of them stick around, some of them don't. And now they're trying to like build out live streaming. You have like a token, right, tied to each live stream. So you have like thousands of people streaming concurrently. How do you like manage all this? So I think it's the necessity is definitely going to be recognized by more and more like users and developers of applications and chains. As you have more stuff like this coming to the surface. More of these killer apps.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is like the way I sort of think about it is like, the iOS ecosystem when it launched, it needed a bunch of killer apps to like kickstart the revolution. And the killer applications weren't just applications that allowed you to do a bunch of interesting things, but also created businesses. That is also an important feature as well. The ability to scale, the ability to be expressive and have rich applications also usher in the era of thriving businesses. One of the key things, I think A16Z actually put out a study I feel like a few months or maybe a few weeks ago, which said that there are 7,200 full-time devs on Web3. That's like embarrassing. But it does point to like an early stage of an app ecosystem. Like initially when iOS launched, it had this weird language and a weird tool set, and we really enjoyed it. But once they saw there's money to be made, everyone was like, okay, just buy the book, learn Objective-C, and like get started. It's we have to make sure that there is a way for people to build successful businesses that are that can be varied, right? Like when you go to iOS and you look at all the apps, all of them do completely different things. You have payment apps, you have lifestyle apps, you have fitness apps, you have so many different things that are on offer, and that is why it is a thriving, mini economy in itself. Right now, we are basically limited to these two or three things that people are interested in, which are mostly in DeFi. And all applications are kind of like copies of each other to some extent. If you want to usher in lots of devs, if you want to usher in lots of use cases, lots of different kinds of like applications, we need to make sure bottlenecks are lifted in the DevX. Bottlenecks are lifted in the infrastructure space as well. I think Boundless and zk has actually already shown that the infrastructure bottlenecks are going to be lifted. Like they mostly are. Like all we're waiting for is Boundless to go mainnet and like really start like offering things, and then it's all about DevX. How easy is it to actually build an application and get it out into production? That's something that we're going to focus on as well. Like our goal is not to just build infra and hope and pray that people will come, but rather rely on some of my background and the team's background in actually using our infrastructure, figuring out where the bottlenecks are and fixing them either through solutions or offering grants or like working with people to like unblock things as well. My aim really, and this used to be the aim of Apple as well, is idea to production in 30 days. You should have an idea, get a couple of people, and you should be able to go to production in 30 days to test out your idea, get like your first 100 users, iterate, get your next 1,000 users, and move to seed raise. Like that is the structure in which like Y Combinator and all these other like Web2 startups function. I want to replicate that action because people are familiar with that. That's how you end up with a Spotify. That's how you end up with like more things, right? Like I want to see that, and I want Boundless to be the catalyst that like drives that.
Yeah, I think it was really great to touch on the business side of things, because I brought up Pump Fun. Like as you rightfully mentioned, like what is maybe the biggest thing of Pump Fun is that it's made like almost 800 $800 million. So yeah, I mean, and yeah, you definitely need the applications. I was thinking even like some UGC platforms, like Roblox, stuff like that. Like some of these platform teams are making their own killer app themselves. No one wants to do it. Like, hey, we'll make one ourselves. Maybe this will get the ball rolling, helping to get more developers interested in this kind of stuff. And yeah, so I think it definitely makes sense. Seems like a very like pragmatic approach to prioritize that. So yeah, I think we can talk actually more about the application business side of thing. I think more chains today are like waking up to this and kind of like kind of moving more of their pieces towards onboarding these kind of like skilled developers who have a knack for that kind of thing, toward like actually getting users on. But I think we can talk about a little bit more about the architecture first. So you mentioned earlier going the Trident like POV, right? Like, okay, we have an L1 and L2. Like we have a bunch of these zk chains now. Some of them, like Polygon maybe didn't roll out the way that they wanted. So yeah, in 2025, like it seems obvious, like, okay, chain agnostic, this is a good approach. Like when was that decision kind of made? Like how early in the, I guess, life cycle? And then, can you also like walk us through the mindset behind that decision? And also like how is it technically possible?
Yeah, so I think that's it speaks volumes to the meritocratic nature of the Risc ZERO and Boundless team. We decided on this like path, I would say about 8 or 9 months ago, really. When initially there was like a lot of discussion around like, okay, what is the best path? Like, can we just sort of talk it out and like figure out what is the best path here? And what we realized is like all of it is extremely theoretical. Building an L1, I think after managing Avalanche for a reasonable period of time, I knew that like an L1 comes with not one but like a million headaches beyond just building an L1, like maintaining an L1 and like an ecosystem and all the 400 things that come with it. I think there's like a whole fear around it, but building a zk native L1 was like really appealing to us. And to be honest, we see like teams like Highly launching like a zkL1, and I think they did the testnet launch like a few weeks ago, and I was part of their launch details as well. But that was the kind of idea that we had as well. But again, an L1 is hard. And L2 is the easiest path forward, right? Like you just contact a roll up as a service and tell them like, here's a credit card, like help us set it up, and they'll do it for you. But then you get locked in. You are now part of the camp. You are somewhat aligned, or whatever it is that people want to say. And then there is also bridging and all of these other like DevX and user experience issues. A business is won or lost on the edges of these things. Like devs and the crypto Twitter can get very excited about things, but ultimately, there's like a CTO and a CFO on the other side of every deal going like, wait, you're another L2. I have to do what with your tokens again? Like bridge it? Like how do I manage them? Like, no, I'm good. Actually, I think this is way too much of a hassle, right? People might just like push back based on that. We realize that is part of that conversation as well. The last way, the most sort of like expansive, wide way of like building Boundless was being chain agnostic. And the more we thought about it, from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense. What it does is like, let's say I start on just one chain, let's say I start on Ethereum, and that's where all my, proof demand actually comes from. Now, because it is a market that is, because Boundless connects to all the markets, if I were to launch a new market, it's not a cold start anymore, because you are now subsidized by the traffic on like other chains. We realized for like expansion and getting more demand, this is the ideal strategy. The other one is like, if we were to actually deploy our smart contracts and our market contracts on every chain, we inherit the guarantees of that chain in terms of like having that application available and never going down and all of that stuff. Also, we have a native DevX. People now on ETH who understand smart contracts are like looking at smart contracts going, oh, I know how to use this, and I can just place my bids and things happen, and I don't need to relearn a thing. That is the best DevX possible. You're not asking them to do a new thing. You're just asking them to use smart contracts. That was, again, extremely appealing to us. The other questions were like, can we optimize gas costs and stuff? And for that, we built it out. We built all of these out, all of these POCs out. We even built a POC of an L1, if you will believe me. And then we realized like this is the best approach. We got a ton of feedback from our customers as well. A lot of our validation comes from customer feedback. We don't fire from the hip. It's just how we are built as a company. We don't, where we are forced to make guesses, we like accumulate as much information as possible, discuss it, and then pull the lever on hard decisions. But wherever possible, we want to talk to potential customers and get their feedback. We got a ton of feedback around the smart contract based approach. Everyone loved it. Everyone loved the fact that we can deploy Boundless markets everywhere and every EVM chain on day one. Which means we're on Base, we're on Arbitrum, Optimism, we're on Ethereum, obviously, Sepolia, all of it on day one, which is a amazing way for us to like gain traction, help our BD team and ecosystem team to grow, and Solana as well. So this gives us this opportunity to like keep expanding. Yeah, so that's why we made that decision. The most interesting thing about that decision really is that internally, our head of product was like a big fan of the L2 approach. Jeremy was a huge fan of the L1 approach and was more of a senior engineer who was a fan of the smart contract approach. And his idea won out. That's what I mean. Our culture of meritocracy is actually like not something we just make up. Even the most important decisions are driven through data and, what makes sense. And everyone is allowed to, not just allowed, empowered and encouraged to participate in building out our roadmap and suggesting where we should be headed. Because ultimately there's so much to do. If somebody has like anybody has like an amazing idea, we want to like grab it and like, run with it.
Yeah, I think it's really good to expand on that. So yeah, I mean, we had on, or I guess this hasn't been posted yet, but we had on Zeta Chain on this show, and what is our whole thing? It's like deploy one smart contract, one instance, and then be on all the chains. So I think, this is going to be something that's more attractive to more and more developers, as like the favorite chains are changing. So I think, Electric Capital released their developer report, and now like, it's like every single region, like Asia, India, US, is like Ethereum number 1 clearly, and then Solana number 2. So every single region is like that. but like just 1 or 2 years ago, like was that the case? I don't know. So yeah, it definitely seems like you don't want to get locked in, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is like a lot of people on crypto Twitter, especially, I find it very amusing when people are like hyper fans of a chain.
Mm.
I don't know what that means. I'm like, it's a piece of infrastructure. Like, do you really care if your software uses AWS or Azure? Builders should be focused on users and not the infrastructure players. Like we provide a service. Like, and I'm saying this honestly about Boundless as well. Like, we provide a service to like builders. If you find something that is way, way better, way, way cheaper, way, way whatever, you should be using that, because end of the day, satisfying your users is what you as a builder need to be caring about. I'm not a huge fan of like ETH alignment or Solana alignment, or like, this is all just like the television channel that is Twitter telling you to like think about things in a certain way. You need to focus on your users. That it is my number one advice to every young entrepreneur that I meet in Web3. Some of them ask me for advice, some of them ask me for, some kind of guidance or whatever. I'm like, you're thinking about this backwards. You shouldn't be worried about what, you know, Sriram versus Tolly versus Vitalik are talking about. You should be worried about what your customers are telling you about your product. They're saying maybe it's too expensive, maybe it's too slow, maybe they're having issues with logins, maybe they're having issues moving funds around. Focusing on customers, customer obsession, these are like things that are not just business savvy, sort of like saying it's wisdom through the ages. And it goes beyond technology, beyond Web1 as well. Like, focusing on your end users, making sure they are satisfied customers and they're telling other people to use your application is the number one way to like get more users and retain them. And once you have a large enough user base, monetizing them is not that hard. Once they're satisfied with your service, people will pay a premium for an excellent service. It's something everyone's wising up to it. But I think there's a small little gap left in Web3, and we're going to pass that chasm this year, where people start focusing more on users and not just developers, but the developers themselves focusing on users and like pushing everybody and pulling everybody along in terms of roadmap and giving very stern feedback. We saw that with ETH as well. Earlier this year, there was quite a lot of like, hey, we need to be more product focused and whatnot, which I think is great feedback for ETH as well. Like, you can't rest on your laurels. Yes, you might be number one, but technology has a funny way of like toppling kings pretty quickly. I used to work at Microsoft for the longest time. We watched as Amazon grew out of nowhere and brought about AWS. We were like, what is even going on? How are they even doing this so quickly? It's because as Microsoft was making hand over fist money selling Office and Windows, and they stole that crown from us. So it's important for even the most emergent and dominant players to stay on their toes and focus on customers always, not get disillusioned by what's going on social media. It's literally social media. I tell everyone it's a TV channel. You're watching a TV channel. Like, do you listen to your TV channel and run your life? No. Then why are you letting CT tell you what to do? Focus on the people you should be focusing on, which is your customers.
This episode is brought to you by Pendle. Pendle is a leading protocol in the DeFi yield sector, operating as a permissionless yield trading protocol, facilitating the tokenization and splitting of any yield-bearing assets in DeFi. This allows users to speculate on future yield or earn a fixed rate on their assets. Learn more at pendle.finance.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a really good way to frame it. You have like these users maybe. For whatever reason, they're playing favorites, have like, okay, the chain seems interesting, and like they care more about the chain than like the actual like developers of the apps who have much more at stake probably. Even like probably half the reason, half the time, is just like incentives. I mean, who knows how much like what that Robinhood deal with Arbitrum was, but it was worded very, carefully, like not, this is potentially like an interim thing. Like we might, make our own thing down the line, but that's definitely a big part of it. So, I think, as you mentioned, I think for everyone involved, this is like becoming it's like moving away from that, it's almost like a fandom kind of, aura around some of these chains and the way they're perceived. Maybe that just speaks to their marketing, I guess, which is maybe like a good thing for them. But okay, yeah, I think we can move things back to Boundless as well. So one of the concepts introduced with Boundless is, proof of verifiable work. So I think, yeah, you kind of briefly touched on it a little bit. Yeah, can you, for the audience, can you maybe walk us through how this works in practice? Like, yeah, maybe let's give like an example of like an application, and then how this would actually, yeah, unfold in practice.
Yeah. So one way to think about Boundless, of course, is it's a marketplace. We think a lot of people want to build compute and proven marketplaces, but Boundless is probably the only marketplace for zk, which is also a zk marketplace. And what I mean by that is the marketplace actually uses zk and the properties of zk proofs to make it more efficient and make it more suitable for the purchase and sell of like compute for zk. So let's maybe talk first from the DevX point of view. So maybe I'm on ETH, I have like smart contract and there's some control flow logic, and I'm going somewhere, and then I'm like, oh, here's this really big piece of computation I need. So I make a call to the Boundless contract and I say, hey, I need this computation to be done. Here are the inputs. Here's how much I'm willing to pay for this proof. Here's how much I need it. Here's the time limit, or like I need it done in 12 hours or something like that. Some more sort of like parameters. I put that out there. The smart contracts essentially like talk to this network of provers through the Boundless network and say like, hey, here's this bid. Who wants in? We use a reverse Dutch auction, so people can converge towards bids really quickly. And people say, okay, I'm gonna pick it up and do this job. Cool. So you pick up the job, do it, and you land the proof on chain. Your dev on the other side who's built this application, it gets notified and it continues with its logic, which is absolutely fantastic. From your perspective as a dev or as a smart contract builder, you just called some API and said, I need this proof by this time. It landed and you're just moving on with life. Perfect. From a DevX perspective, that's as smooth as it can possibly get on that side. On the prover side, it's a lot more complicated. So an example or a way of thinking about this is like Uber or Lyft or all these companies as well, where people deploy their own hardware, that is cars, across the road, and there's jobs coming in. They pick up jobs, they do the jobs. Then they also have idle time that adds to their cost of like not doing jobs in the meantime, or like keeping 30% of their GPUs running cold. There is a huge set of like things that add to their capex, opex, and their cost of running their business. It also takes a large amount of time to onboard provers and keep them online and provide availability to provers. So let's say you actually order an Uber, and just because Uber has like a weird way of like paying its cab drivers, half of them turn off their app all the time, you'll have availability issues. That's something we wanted to tackle, and that's when we landed on proof of verifiable work, which is our own innovation in how we actually give availability guarantees on Boundless, also create a reward mechanism that works, and also is a fraud mechanism. And what that basically does is at the end, at every epoch, we actually calculate how much work every single prover has done on the network and are able to reward them using our ZKC tokens or ZK coin tokens at the end of every epoch. The way we're able to do this is every proof generated on Boundless comes with a cryptographically secured metadata that says like, oh, here's the work that they've done. If you tamper this metadata, the proof fails or is corrupt. So what that means is we are able to show how much work everybody has done and then distribute the emission rewards directly to them. It is very, very similar to proof of work, but with one improvement where now like there isn't a winner takes all mentality. It is a fair distribution of rewards. So let's say, Daniel, you bring 100 machines, I bring 10 machines, you do 10x the amount of work that I do, you get 10x the amount of emission rewards that I do. It doesn't mean I don't get anything. It just means fair reward mechanisms. In our opinion, this is what Satoshi's dream possibly lacked in a lot of ways, because ZK wasn't ready. We actually see this as furthering of proof of work, which is why we call it proof of verifiable work. An interesting thing here is that from a perspective of somebody who's doing the proofs, there is now a dual reward mechanism. So somebody who wants a proof done is willing to pay for it in ETH. They are also getting ZKC for doing the proofs. This is going to create a subsidy effect. Because I'm getting ZKC, I'm going to go, yeah, I can do the proof for cheaper. In fact, I'll do it for really cheaper. In fact, all I care about is ZKC, so I'm ready to do it for nearly free, which is fantastic. Because as the cost of proving keeps falling down, and similar sort of protocols like Bitcoin famously or Filecoin see subsidies of 90 to 95%. If you're able to do that, and the cost of proving falls by that order of magnitude, let's say it even falls by 50%, now we're entering this sort of economic argument of Jevons paradox, which basically talks about high utility assets when they drop in cost. Instead of like the market sort of collapsing, what happens is people start using it a lot more. The classic example is coal. When the price of coal went down, the steam engine came about. Like people started using coal everywhere. Cities started getting heated. Urbanization started happening. The entire industrial revolution, kick-started. Compute has that same set of properties. So when cost of compute actually went down with AWS, with improvements in hardware and all the other things as well, people didn't use computers less. Computers just became universal. You had computer in your pocket, on your watch, in your car. Computers became smaller, bigger. They went everywhere. Similarly, as cost of verifiable computation goes down, usage will explode. That's really, it is safe to say it's a bet, but I'd also say it's like a really safe bet to make.
Yeah, I think it's a very good analogy to kind of tie it to like accessibility of commodities and that sort of thing. Always good to, especially like for infrastructure stuff to get users like understanding these kind of concepts. So I think it laid a good foundation for like like how these proofers can compete right in the market. So I guess like what would be like on the application side, right? Like I think you've made a very strong emphasis on the applications and like actually like profitable applications. When it comes to like attracting these kinds of like developers, like, what is your guys' approach, I guess, towards like trying to have like an ecosystem of businesses tapping into these smart contracts and across multiple chains and all that. Just walk me through you guys is like give like a proactive approach, and then I guess what kind of because application is like very broad terms, like what kind of applications are we talking about? Like DeFi, talking about how many more like you talked about Uber and stuff like that, or like non-crypto stuff. Just broad thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think I always have a portfolio style management approach, which means I don't do one thing. I try and like break it up into two or three things. I think short term and things in front of us, very simple, roll ups, DeFi. It's like everybody's chasing that, but you have to chase that as well. That is the business in front of us. This is where people are right now. We want to make sure all rollups are validity rollups. We're working towards that. We have OP Kailua, which makes it really, really easy for people to turn their rollup into a validity rollup and start reaping the benefits of that increased security and offer their customers better user experiences based on all the guarantees that they get. It's only for OP right now. We want to make sure we are expanded across all the rollup stacks and work with all the rollup as a service providers as distribution centers to make sure we do give people access to that. OP Kailua is directly plugged into Boundless, so it's even easier from a DevX perspective to update your chain. A lot of chains are working on this or having different conversations with us about this. As Boundless launches, the cost of proving goes down. This becomes a basic no-brainer for a lot of folks. The other category is DeFi. It's possibly, I would say, the only sort of major product market fit that people have for on-chain applications. I think if you want to really abstract out what DeFi is as a programming pattern, it's look at a bunch of assets, do a bunch of math, update a bunch of assets. Basically that's it. And based on that, we developed something called Steel, which allows you to execute or provide proof of execution of smart contracts. Basically, we already have a smart contract written. We can run it for you inside a zkVM with the inputs and just submit that proof. That allows you to do 1.2 billion gas worth computations for $10. 1.2 billion gas is I don't know, 20, 25 blocks, which is basically impossible. I don't even know how you would price it, but let's say you did, it would be like, I don't know, some $400,000, $500,000 worth of like computation. Now you're getting it for like $10. These kind of like tools allow people to like really scale up what we have today. And that's one category. We're definitely chasing that. And we have a very active BD ecosystem team that is like working with these folks to get them onboarded and get them more familiar with the tools. We also have a forward deployed engineering team. We my background and my wife's background in particular is in doing sales engineering and forward deployed engineering work. I interviewed a bunch of folks and like realized like the Palantir model is the model that we want to follow. Deploy engineers to help people get over the last mile. And that's something we've been doing really, really successfully in getting current teams to like move forward. So that's one aspect. The next aspect is like, okay, where is this industry headed? How do we prepare companies or work with companies that are currently small, possibly not known, or like don't even have a company name yet? And how do we work with them towards building out the future? You think about this is how Stripe actually grew. Before Uber was a thing, they were the preferred like payment provider for Uber. And when Uber became gigantic, Stripe just grew with them. From our perspective, we want to also like talk to teams and work with teams that are ZK native and are building with ZK. I think you talked about Zeta. We've spoken to Zeta markets like quite a few times as well. Like they're a fantastic team. They're already thinking in terms of like, oh, when ZK is basically the way to do everything, that's when people are going to start using ZK. How do I get ahead of that curve? And there are quite a lot of teams that are doing interesting things, novel things, either in finance, in identity, in intents, in cross-chain things, as well as like bridging. We are working with a bunch of them to like rethink the architecture, rethink the primitives of Web3. So in a world where ZK is actually like commonplace and is present on all the chains, and we're able to prove not just like state transitions of chains, but also consensus and all of that, we would be solving the liquidity fragmentation problem instantaneously. So the concept of my assets are on that chain, so I need to do some bridging and do a bunch of weird things is all gone. You can just instantaneously using a ZK proof trust chain state across different chains and provide a global overlook or global overlay of all your assets across all your chains. Once you're able to do that, build new applications that can take advantage of these tools and primitives. We are seeing that as well. Then there is, of course, the really long-term play. When I say long-term, I mean like a year plus around identity, privacy, compliance. These are buzzwords to a lot of people. I worked in that industry for basically all my management life. I understand compliance. I ran Coinbase compliance engineering. Like I can tell you, it's not what people think it is. It is extraordinarily complicated. It's absolutely entrenched with like certain players. There are structural problems, government problems, regulator problems there. But there is a way out of it, and we want to invest in building that out. And I'm being very specific in my word choice here. We will build it out. Basically, there is an issue with people's understanding of like what compliance, identity, security is in a lot of ways, and how Web2 uses it and how it's actually applicable to different applications. Since we have the relevant domain expertise and being based out of Seattle, we have access to the right kind of talent as well. Post mainnet, one of my goals is to actually seed some of these teams internally to build out the different tools and services necessary to supercharge people. Like I want to build out all the compliance tools so that somebody can just take it off the shelf and be like, okay, I'm just going to use this and plug it into my app, and my lawyers are going to fine tune this for me, and I'm done. And I am now able to provide compliance services without having to worry about how do I build this from scratch and so on. Like for folks who are from Web2, IBM owns this business. Like IBM Compliance Cloud runs PayPal, runs like everything that you know. They just corner this business because they provide these off-the-shelf services to people. There's no one thinking about these things in Web3. Since we want to change the pattern on how people build applications and take them to becoming businesses, I want to solve the end-to-end problems for founders, so that they see Boundless as the choice to like build sustainable businesses. So that's like a really long answer, but like that's how I sort of think about a portfolio of like projects and not just one.
Yeah, I think it's really great to touch on kind of the near, mid, and long term goals, I guess. Also touching on some of the approaches that you guys have taken to make it easier to integrate Boundless across these various chains. You brought up OP Kailua from the OP stack. I'm from Hawaii, like pretty close to. Well, I assume it's based on like that town in Hawaii. Am I
I mean,
mistaken?
it really is. And I've actually been to it as well. I took a picture and I sent it to people. I was like, "Hey, I'm
Nice.
actually standing right here." I'm our lead developer Rami. His nickname on Slack is King of Kailua. He does hope to one day go to Kailua, I think, just to plant a flag. But yeah, it is. It's also based on Kona, which is why
Right.
it's called Kailua. Kona is the OP's iteration on the innovation engine and so on. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't know that last bit.
But OP Kona is like the base on which we're building OP Kailua, and when Kona goes, full availability base, and everybody starts like utilizing it, and then like Kailua becomes entrenched.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, exactly. I think you guys have taken like the kind of the right approach, like meeting these people where they are. You have some pretty, yeah. You have obviously base, using the OP stack. You have world chain based on the OP stack. Um, so yeah, I mean, you gotta if the high profile, teams of all these users are going there, you gotta build out these solutions to give them that kind of like plug and play process. And you brought up identity, which I think is a very like a pretty interesting one. Yeah, as you mentioned, not many people are thinking about it. Yeah, I know world chain, like world, whatever you want to call it. It kind of also has their eye on that as well. I don't know if you're like familiar. Do you have any thoughts on world and their kind of approach to identity in Web3
I mean,
specifically?
I mean, it's one thing I'd say is like the orb is scary, right? Like they are working really hard to like educate people on how it uses zk and how data isn't kept on device, and it's more secure than it looks. Um, I think it's a very, very interesting approach. So they're basically appending everything on saying like, okay, if I can identify everybody on the planet, which is sort of the global goal, then it becomes very easy to build applications based on this sort of registry that I have. Again, like for folks who are slightly older, this is how Windows cornered the market. The most critical product that Windows had was this thing called Active Directory, which is your sort of identity management thing inside like corporations. And every other Windows product was made to use Active Directory, and anything outside was not. So basically, they were like, "Oh, well, nothing else connects, so screw this shit." And like Active Directory kept winning Windows a lot of market. And that's when Okta and all of these guys came in as well. So that is their business model, in my opinion, where the idea is like if I control identity, all the applications are built around me, or applets or something, right? So that's their concept. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the technology is definitely valid. I wish the orb was less scary, and I know they're trying to work on that to make it more easier. And they have a lot of like really good backing with like OpenAI, SAM, and all of that stuff as well. So I actually do think they're going to make a really good dent. Will that be useful for B2B use cases, business use cases where people actually pay for identity services? That's hard. I see it. I mean, like, if I'm running a company, my identity management is actually regulated by the government. It's not something I make a call on. It's like Okta goes and does all this work to come back and tell me, like, hey, man, I'm compliant in every single way. Use me. And I go, okay, cool. Now I can use you. Or Google and says like, oh, I've done all my work, or my Windows, like Microsoft, I've done all my work and I have all the licenses. Like, you are secure if you use me. So that is like the sales thing that is possibly missing, right? Like it's how do they like cross that chasm is going to be hard. As an example, can OpenAI use them for internally for their company as a paid service? Hard. I don't know if they can. So those are things that are worth considering when like actually launching a business versus proving the technology is valid. I think their project to show how ZK is used to like build identity solutions is valid. We need to figure out a way to like actually build it and package it such that it can actually be sold. Otherwise, again, you get back into this meta of like, I built a cool thing that no one wants to buy. And now I'm forced to launch a token and do mimetics around it to like try and go make the token go up, versus focus on the fundamentals of like, I built a cool thing, I packaged it really well, and now I can sell it. It's harder, but means you can survive longer without having to like, do extraordinary things to keep yourself afloat. I do think they're paving the way in a lot of ways. Internally at Risc Zero as well, like we have quite a lot of ideas around how we would build an IAM solution, identity and access management solution. It's a lot of work. Instead of building all of it ourselves, we would much rather partner with incumbents, and that's happening because in Europe and all of these places, they're passing laws around how do you make identity more ZK compatible. One of the big reasons why ZK, if used properly, is quantum resistant, especially if you use Starks and hash-based systems. If 5 years down the line you want to be like quantum resistance, otherwise everything starts cracking when some rogue government sets up a quantum computer and starts focusing on cracking one thing after the other. So there is like a larger movement towards this. However, that will take a little bit of time and patience. Time and patience is the hallmark of Seattle-based companies. We build enterprise companies for a reason. We are happy to go to the 400 meetings until we get our opening and build that thing with people and keep iterating on that. In the meantime, I think it's fantastic for companies like WorldCoin and everyone else, like building fantastic identity products, exploring the space, using ZK more efficiently. And we'd love to also work with teams that are interested in that space, guide them to the best of our abilities, connect them with people. Being from the security space ourselves, we have quite a lot of contacts with interesting people. I actually, here, let me also throw a shout out here. There's a security conference in Seattle every year off the coast of Seattle in an island where you'll run into the security head of Apple, security head of Amazon, all these people kind of hanging out. Highly encourage people to come and visit if they want to have some fun in a very, very nice Seattle summer. So I'll just throw that shout out there for Seattle.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting. I mean, I know one guy who works in security at Microsoft. I have no idea if he's been, but yeah, I did not know. Thanks for enlightening me and the users on the more local security scene in Seattle. Pretty interesting, and I think it's some really good insights on not just world, but kind of the more business side of these kind of applications of the ZK technology, which is actually probably what matters more, right? I know world, they've already had this is already happening. They've had problems already, with the government stuff, in Europe. They had to stop. Yeah, they were suspended in Indonesia for not having the proper licensing. It's nothing to do with crypto. It's it's their compliance stuff, right? So yeah, I think it's very interesting to touch on that side of things. But yeah, we're coming up on an hour, so I thought I'd give you some time to discuss maybe some more things that people aren't familiar with. I know you guys have some internal projects. I think you discussed this at was that in Cannes? Was it at ECC?
Yeah, it was. We have a bunch of interesting projects that are coming up. All of them have code names internally. One publicly stated one is Project 10. All the code names are also numbers. 10 actually stands for 10x. We have a stated goal of 10xing our performance and the cost of not 10x the cost, I guess 1/10 the cost of proving on Boundless. And we're working towards that. We have Jeremy and Frank are hard at work on our V3 of our circuit, which is going to blow everybody out of the water in terms of performance. We are extremely confident about where it's headed. We have alpha numbers that are even we are hey, did we do the test wrong? How is it really that good? So that's going to be something we're chasing down. And that chase is probably never going to stop until we hit some kind of physics barrier. Binius might be really the last major step in that direction, and after which ASICs and something else will take us a little bit forward. But at some point we will hit a physics barrier where we can't get better than native performance. But that's great. If we get to that spot, means amazing outcomes for everybody. So that's something we're chasing down. Project 30 I spoke to you about just earlier as well, which is our stated goal to make sure we take application development idea to production in 30 days. Opikailua, Steel, these are first steps. We have an internal project. Its code name is Pilot, where we want to see how much we can abstract out for application builders such that your 80% of your code is already pre-written for you. It's not about using AI, but figuring out what people actually build and how we can make it much faster for them. We're going to rely a lot on our hard-earned data of like seeing people build with ZK, and see the commonalities, common patterns, and common failure modes as well, and fix all of that for people, so people can go from like, hey, I need to do some NFT something. Okay, like 10 lines of code, you're done. Like, go ahead, have fun. How do we get to that? That's something we're working towards. There is the rest are kind of like super secretive. One is Project 42. For folks who are familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42 is the answer to everything. We have a really midterm, like sometime maybe like by the end of this year, a project that I'm personally quite proud of. We want to shake a few things up, and that's going to be really, really interesting as well. And then, there's continuous work on adding more innovative ZK features on Boundless. We call that Project One because it's our primary target to make sure Boundless is the home of ZK, and any sort of ZK need that anybody has is satisfied on Boundless. Think of it like how AWS basically allows you to access networking, AI, ML, GPU, CPU, databases, data warehousing, all in like one shop. We want to like figure out what that is for Boundless and keep improving on that as well. Those are our stated goals. And then there is like the last thing which both my CEO and I are currently like drafting. It's called Project CLI. CLI in Roman numerals is 151. It's a 3-year plan of where we want to be in 3 years. Investors, strategic advisors already know what it is, but like that's something we want to write out and actually publish around mainnet. One of the things that I want to do personally as the CEO of Boundless is not run Boundless the way some foundations are run, a sort of like a lethargic rubber stamping body that just gives out grants and falls asleep, but rather run it more like a wannabe Fortune 500 company, have that aggression in how we want to, the future that we want to see and how we are going to help build it, and be extremely proactive, doing all of that and chase that down with sincerity and hard work. We're ready to put in the elbow grease, and we're on a first step. Mainnet beta launches in like a few weeks time, and that's going to be our first step. And then from there, the rocket ship takes off. Really looking forward to like having the community, builders, and everyone else join us. Also like extremely open to feedback and everything else as well. Like one of the things that I want to focus on is like listening to people, what they need to succeed, and like help build that stuff out, and be very open about what we can build, what we can't build, what we need help building, and like work with people, like-minded people who want to see the industry grow. We want to grow with you. There is no I in team. So yeah.
That was great. Yeah. Between that, like the internal projects, and you mentioned some interesting things like kind of like the engineering approaches, taking a bit from Palantir, things like that. Yeah, like normally, you wouldn't want to discuss like internal operations stuff with like the founders in the pod. It's like kind of boring, but in this case, it's actually pretty interesting. I mean, I think we just passed the hour mark. So is there any last things that you want to leave the audience with? Like developers, node operators, just like users interested in trying things out. Like I guess maybe in the next like 3-6 months, is there anything that people can maybe look forward to, pay attention to from you guys?
Yeah, I think in 3 to 6 months, we'd be in a state where we are able to offer people compute at extremely low prices, and in a way that is extremely accessible to them. So somewhere around now, or rather like in a few weeks time, I think teams that are entrepreneurial want to start thinking about building fantastic new applications using the power of ZK. That's the time to start. We would love to like work with young, hungry teams who want to get started. We are working with all the large teams, right? Large teams, like we know about them, they know about us. It's like a BD conversation. My people are talking to their people, and CEO talk and all that. But if there's a younger team, reach out to me directly. I'm happy to like help you navigate the chaos of Web3, to focus your attention on like what you should be focusing on, so that you can get started. And with the foundation's goal and funds behind us, like we want to like help like the right teams reach the right outcomes. We love like-minded people who are like looking to like build a business, looking for the 10-year outlook and not like the 6-month outlook. And we want to like help those teams succeed. Ultimately, that's what will make the entire ecosystem succeed. And we are here for the long run.
If you stuck around right until the end, there was just some technical difficulties. I got booted from the recording studio right as Shiv was delivering his last few sentences. But make sure to follow Boundless, Boundless_XYZ on X, on Twitter, for more updates from their side. Thank you guys for listening.